Hi everybody, welcoming you again to the video lecture Current Affairs series initiative by IQCivils. In this particular session, we shall be discussing about 6 important topics of the previous week. The first one talks about surveys, stresses, thinking, skilling, learning to boost job prospects. So apparently from the title of the article, it is so suggestive that we shall be discussing about the skill-based education that the government of India has been recently talking about. The major emphasis will come to it from the NAP 2020, right? About the second important topic that we shall be discussing today is about the proposed EU carbon border tax adjustment. This was something which the European Union proposed at the 27th edition of COP of UNFCCC at Egypt that took place very recently. So we shall be talking about it in a lot of detail. About the third one, it is so suggestive that 1 crore houses for the poor and middle class under phase 2 of urban housing scheming. So therefore here we shall be talking about Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the urban aspect of it. It is called Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the 2.0 series or the phase second of it. The fourth one, it talks about the government takes a big leap to digitize the farming sector. Therefore, digitization of farming or agriculture herein, right? So this is about budget this year, which was presented very recently. The fifth one is it will be talking about a few schemes which will deal with the tribal development and betterment. The fifth one talks about the tourism destination now next to be in the east. From UP, the focus will shift to Bihar and Orissa. So there are a few important temples herein mentioned about. So therefore, we shall just be taking note of all these particulars. So starting off with the very first topic for today, apparently the highlighted part of the article, I have already done so for the convenience. So reading it out to you, the economic survey which was released on Monday stresses that implementing the new education policy to achieve learning outcomes and thinking that with skilling outcomes will boost the job prospects of India's youth. The second part of it says only 51% of India's graduates were employable. The median age of India's workforce is 28. Now, the next important part suggests that said improving learning outcomes and undoing the COVID-induced learning losses more urgent than ever. This is an important aspect of it. It notes that skilling is falsely taken as applying to dropouts and those who did not perform well in academics, but that perception needs to change to boost employability. This is another important fact of it. The most important part of the article it so suggests that the central government expenditure has been hovering at 2.8% of GDP over the last few years. So this much of the Indian GDP does the government spend on education. So I would rather request all of you to kindly have a comparison between the other educated countries, other developed countries, other developing countries, and how much is India spending in comparison with that. Accordingly, there was a report that it is so called India Skills Report, India Skills Report of 2015. This particular report so suggests that it established India's lack in development of skills. It so suggests that of all the students who applied for jobs, out of them only 33% students were found employable by the employers. So this was an important fact. Apparently, recent data from the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, it is so suggested that apparently people ranging in this age group, out of these people, only 2% of them have received formal vocational training. Right. So if we need to compare this particular data with the people with the people from other countries, it suggests that Korea, they have some 96%. Japan, they have 80% of their population which have received formal vocational training. In Germany, the figure is around 75%, and for UK, the figure is around about 68%. Apparently, India is lacking. However, there are certain challenges to be achieved or for that matter to be tackled. Among them, the very first one that is understood is despite the various initiatives that the government has taken, there is considerably a low participation that we see, right? So the participation in the sector is really less. Secondly, the idea is there is a mismatch between the training, there is a mismatch between whatever has been trained, whatever these people have been trained with, and whatever the requirement of the job market is. So therefore, there is a mismatch between the training and the job market. Apparently, the skill development ecosystem in India lacks adequate industry linkages as well. Moreover, the major issue which most people comes to talk about of is that there is a challenge for the people living in the rural and the disadvantaged area. They cannot have an access or rather easy access to the skill development programs. There are certain challenges which we have just discussed about. Apparently the government of India has come up with various kind of schemes. Apparently it is called Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. This is one of them. Then we have another one. It is called Sankalp, which if populated can read out skills acquisition and knowledge awareness for livelihood promotion. Then we have got the Uran scheme. Then we have Skill India scheme, right? And apparently just at the very beginning of the video we also discussed about the provisions of NEP 2020, which so links education with skills. So therefore we are much more going about the skill based education thing in India. Skill-based education. So this is more or less what the government is trying to do, with the idea of trying and imbibing the youth of the country with a lot of skills, such that their employability increases. And that is the reason. As far this particular data is concerned, that only 51% of India's graduates are employable, the government is trying to deal with this particular provision. Moving on to the next particular thing, it suggests that proposed EU carbon border adjustment tax is protectionist. Again, reading out the important factors of this particular article, it so says that Economic Survey has noted that the forthcoming carbon border adjustment tax by the European Union went against the spirit of the Paris Agreement. The next part says tariffs that will apply on the energy intensive goods imported into European Union. Next part of it says this is to ensure that local manufacturers of iron, steel and aluminium, which consume enormous fossil fuel, are not at a competitive disadvantage from similar goods produced in the developing countries whose industries have more permissive fossil fuel emission norms. Next is these taxes are in contravention to the spirit of the Paris Agreement that recognize common but differentiated responsibilities. India is among the top 8 countries that will be adversely affected by CABM. There is an initiative called Global Trade Research Initiative. This is the particular thing which says India is going to be one of the 8 major countries affecting, which will be affected because of EU carbon tax. The last particular data which the article so suggests is that in 2022, 27% of India's exports of iron, steel and aluminium products worth $8.2 billion went to the EU. So therefore the idea is this particular tax was introduced by the EU as an import duty placed on the carbon emitted during production of goods which would enter EU. Just like at the very beginning of this particular video, I suggested that this particular tax was suggested by EU at the 27th edition of COP, that is Conference of Parties, at which was held at Sharm el Sheikh, which happens to be in Egypt, right? So apparently, EU suggested or proposed such kind of a tax border adjustment at this particular edition of COP. It is suggested that it is a mechanism to encourage cleaner industrial production outside EU. Okay. However, the major idea of it is that it is a part of European Green Deal component. European Green Deal component. And what is this particular thing? European Green Deal. This is something which endeavors to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. Apparently, there are certain issues in its implementation because there have been a lot of opposition from major economies, particularly from the basic group, which is Brazil, South Africa, India, and China. So all of them have been terming it discriminatory and against the principles of equity and common, but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, which is so suggested here as to be disagreeing the spirit of the Paris Agreement, which is so suggested. This is something which is also felt to be in contravention to the Rio Declaration. Accordingly, EU's notion of having a uniform standard all over the world for the environment is not born out of the global consensus contained in the Article 12 of the Rio Declaration, which says that the standards applicable to developed countries cannot be applied to developing countries. So therefore, this particular deal has also been termed as a protectionist scheme for the industrialists of European Union, which is suggesting that it is to ensure that local manufacturers of iron, steel, and aluminium, which consumes enormous fossil fuel, are not at a competitive disadvantage. This is what major idea of the carbon border tax adjustment of the EU is. However, EU source has suggested that it would cut carbon emissions by at least 55%. By at least 55% by 2030 as compared to the 1990 levels, and these have fallen by at least 24% by now. However, emissions from imports contributing to 20% of the EU's carbon dioxide emissions are increasing. So therefore, the idea of implementing such a tax goes for European Union such high demands of meeting or to kind of try to cut down the carbon emissions, right? About it, the impact in India would be majorly on the steel and the aluminum products, as it has been suggested that 27% of India's exports of iron and steel and aluminium went to the EU in 2022. So therefore, the union, apparently the European Union is also India's third largest trading partner. So apparently, this is definitely going to have an impact on the businesses of the Indian industrialists dealing with such particular things, and therefore this will also be a major impact. This will also have a major impact on the core sectors, which has got eight industries in together. Moving on to the next one. This is majorly from here. Rather, we will be talking about the few schemes which has come about in the budget of 2024. Apparently, the budget for this year has got 9 priority sectors. Apparently, productivity and resilience in agriculture, employment and skilling, inclusive human resource, social justice, MSME sector, urban development, energy security, infrastructure, innovation, research and development, and therefore next generation reforms. Mostly they are forming the part of it. Apparently, the first one which features here is reading about the highlighted portions herein. It is so suggested that the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban 2.0 with 2.2 lakh crores central assistance over the next 5 years to construct more than 1 crore houses, right? A provision of the interest subsidy to facilitate loans at affordable rates are also envisaged. Enabling policies and regulations for efficient and transparent rental housing markets with enhanced availability will also be put out in place. Apparently, not much about it is known because this is something which will be worked out later. But whatever comes here in the article, it so suggests that the amount included rupees 3,000 crore for the credit-linked subsidy scheme for the economically weaker section or lower income group. Again, rupees 1,000 crore for the middle income group. Rupees 500 crore for the credit risk guarantee fund trust. About the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, this has been something which has been covered already in a previous video. Apparently, the urban aspect of it and the second phase of it, the details of which will be furnished later. Apparently, here another features which talks about the Swanidhi scheme. It talks about Swanidhi, Pradhan Mantri Swanidhi scheme, right? This particular scheme is basically a central sector scheme which is fully funded by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs within the following subjects, aiming to facilitate working capital loan, to incentivize regular repayment, to reward digital transactions, and mostly this is something for the urban poor, including the street vendors, apparently microfinance institutions, non-banking financial companies, self-help groups. All of these particulars, because of their proximity and their ground presence, they have been suggested to lend out working capital loans to major street workers of the urban areas. Apparently, this budget talks about allocation of the PM Swanidhi scheme, which gives street vendors working capital loans, was reduced from 468 crore in the budgetary estimate of 2023-24 to rupees 326.32 crores. So the budgetary allocation was decreased, because of which Pradhan Mantri Swanidhi scheme also becomes important from that perspective. Apparently, it becomes Pradhan Mantri Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi. Moving on to the next particular thing, it talks about government takes a big leap to digitize the farming sector. Whatever important herein can be read again. The Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Tuesday announced the implementation of digital public infrastructure in agriculture over the years. This would rather ease farmers' access to government schemes and services and allow them to receive customized advisories, DPI-based crop survey in 400 districts across the country during the ongoing Kharif season. Apparently, digital crop survey for Kharif season using the DPI will be taken up in 400 districts. 6 crore farmers and their lands will be brought into the farmer and land registries. The budget overall allocation for agriculture sector is some 1.52 lakh crore. DPI in agriculture is aimed at enabling the development of innovative farmer-centric digital services, timely and reliable agriculture information available. And this particular idea has got three basic and broad components. One is called the Agri-Stack. The other is called Krishi DSS, and the last one of it is called the Soil Profile Maps. Right, we shall go about in detail about all these three components of the scheme. It is written herein, but majorly the idea is to have that DPI will focus or provide farmers easy access to government schemes and services like MSP-based procurement, crop insurance, crop loans. It will also allow them to receive customized advisory services as per their crops, land, soil, and agro-climatic conditions. This is majorly the idea of DPI, or trying to digitize the agriculture sector. Apparently, of the three broad components of this particular initiative suggested in this particular government, in this particular budget, under Agri-Stack, which is so said that three foundational registries will be prepared: a farmers registry and Aadhaar like unique ID of farmers linked dynamically to the land records, and a crop sold registry. Right. About the Krishi DSS, it is a repository of the geospatial data covering various indicators like weather, soil, crop, and groundwater data. It will enable evidence-based decisions by officials. Apparently, the Minister of Agriculture, he so says that it at least takes 15 to 20 days to get a crop loan today, and with the digitization of the system, it will be completed in a half an hour's time. Apparently, this is going to help a lot of farmers sustain their identity. Therefore, this is a major scheme under the agriculture, or prioritizing the agriculture sector, which forms one of the priority sectors of the budget of this year. Moving on to the next particular theme of this session, it so suggests that in government outreach to tribals, a new scheme for development of 63,000 villages have been taken concern of. Apparently, the important ideas from the article, it so suggests that with a saturation approach for achieving social justice, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman Tuesday announced a new scheme for socio-economic development of 63,000 tribal villages that will aim to cover 5 crore people from tribal communities. This has also increased allocations for skilling of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Then we also have, in fact, this particular scheme is being called by the government as Pradhan Mantri Janajatiya Unnata Gram Abhiyan. Okay, this is to adopting saturation coverage of tribal families in tribal majority villages and aspirational districts. Apparently, this forms a part of the social sector priority of this budget. There are other schemes which have come down in this particular news report. One is about the Pradhan Mantri Janajati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan, and there are other schemes which calls about here Pradhan Mantri Vikas Mission, Janajatiya Vikas Mission, and there's another one calling Pradhan Mantri Daksha Scheme, and of course not forgetting about the Namaste Scheme, the National Action for Mechanized Sanitization Ecosystem Scheme, which is aimed at eliminating manual scavenging. All these other schemes which have come apart along with the Janajatiya Unnata Gram Abhiyan in this particular news report becomes important from the prelims perspective, and of course also from the mains perspective, trying and dealing with a question which will talk about the betterment and development in the tribal areas. Moving on to the last topic of this particular session, the headline so reads: next tourism destination to be in the east from UP, focus shift to Bihar and Orissa. The major scheme that this particular article talks about is the Prasad scheme by the government of India. It is a pilgrimage related tourism, so it becomes important from the prelims perspective. Rather, here there have been certain mentions of temple which becomes important from the art and culture perspective. The first is the Vishnupada temple in Gaya, then the Mahabodhi temple in Bodh Gaya, also Nalanda and Rajgir. These places were also mentioned. Apparently, there is a scheme or plan which the government calls as Purvodaya. While presenting the budget, Sitharaman said they have a plan formulated called Purvodaya for the all-round development of the eastern region of the country, including Orissa. So they have been talking a lot about developing tourism. They are suggesting that government's efforts in positioning India as a global tourist destination will also create jobs, stimulate investments, and unlock economic opportunities for other sectors as well. So they are also trying to deal in a lot of things in the tourism sector. Apparently, such details become important from the prelims perspective. This was all for this particular session.